The Tesla owner was furious that the elderly mechanic was wasting time running diagnostic tests instead of just changing the battery. 2 hours later, that same car's autonomous driving system was supposed to deliver a bomb to the city courthouse, until Frank's inefficient security protocols saved hundreds of lives. Welcome to Retired Soldier Stories. Before we dive into this incredible tale of hidden expertise and technological terror, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? And if you believe that some knowledge never becomes outdated, even in our rapidly changing world, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who understand that the most dangerous threats often hide behind the most familiar technology. Frank Morrison stood in Bay 3 of Advanced Auto Solutions, wearing the same grease-stained coveralls he'd worn for the past 5 years, staring at the diagnostic screen connected to a 2023 Tesla Model S. The car belonged to Michael Chen. A tech executive who'd been increasingly impatient with Frank's methodical approach to electric vehicle repair. "Look, I just need the battery replaced," Chen said for the third time, checking his expensive watch. "I've got a meeting at the courthouse in 2 hours, and I can't afford to be late. Every other Tesla service center in town could have this done in 30 minutes. Frank didn't look up from the diagnostic screen. At 64, he moved with the deliberate precision of someone who'd learned that rushing through complex systems was a luxury that professionals couldn't afford. His gray hair was thinning. His hands bore the permanent stains of decades working with machinery, and his thick glasses made him look exactly like what he appeared to be: an old-school mechanic struggling to adapt to the electric vehicle revolution. "The battery's fine, Mr. Chen," Frank said quietly, his fingers dancing across the diagnostic interface with surprising fluency. "But there's something else here that needs attention." Chen's frustration was palpable. What could possibly be more important than replacing a defective battery? "I've been getting range warnings for weeks." Frank paused his work and looked at Chen directly. "Your car's autonomous driving system has been modified. The software signature doesn't match Tesla's official firmware, and there are additional programs running in the background that aren't supposed to be there." "That's impossible," Chen snapped. "I bought this car brand new, and I've never had any aftermarket modifications done." "Maybe not intentionally," Frank replied, turning back to the screen. "But someone has definitely been inside your vehicle's computer system." What Michael Chen didn't know, what none of Frank's customers knew, was that Frank Morrison wasn't just another mechanic trying to keep up with electric vehicle technology. He was Franklin Morrison, former senior cybersecurity engineer for the Department of Defense, with 20 years of experience designing and protecting the computer systems that controlled everything from military drones to autonomous combat vehicles. Frank's transition from defense contractor to neighborhood mechanic had been as deliberate as it was necessary. After 2 decades of developing cybersecurity protocols for vehicles that carried nuclear warheads and autonomous weapons systems, Frank had burned out on the pressure and moral complexity of military work. When his wife died in 2018, he'd taken his pension and looked for something simpler, something that would let him work with his hands while staying far away from the life and death decisions that had defined his career. Electric vehicle repair had seemed like the perfect solution. Cars were becoming increasingly computerized, but they were still fundamentally civilian technology. Frank could use his expertise with complex systems without worrying about whether his work was being used to kill people. He'd opened Advanced Auto Solutions in 2019, specializing in electric and hybrid vehicle repair, and had slowly built a reputation as the guy who could diagnose problems that other mechanics couldn't solve. But Frank had also built something else into his business that his customers didn't know about: the most sophisticated automotive cybersecurity scanning system outside of a government facility. Every vehicle that came through his shop was subjected to the same security protocols that Frank had developed for military vehicles. He checked for unauthorized software modifications, analyzed communication patterns, and verified that every system was operating within its designed parameters. Most of the time, Frank's security scans revealed nothing more threatening than aftermarket performance modifications or diagnostic software left behind by previous repair shops. But occasionally, very occasionally, they revealed something that made Frank's blood run cold. Michael Chen's Tesla was one of those occasions. The modifications Frank had discovered weren't simple performance enhancements or diagnostic tools. They were sophisticated pieces of malware designed to override the vehicle's autonomous driving system and allow external control of the car's navigation, acceleration, and braking systems. Someone had turned Chen's Tesla into a remotely controllable weapon. Frank had seen similar systems during his years with the Defense Department. Military autonomous vehicles were designed with multiple layers of security, specifically to prevent them from being hacked and turned against their operators. But civilian vehicles like Chen's Tesla had far fewer protections, and the malware Frank was looking at was advanced enough to suggest it came from someone with serious technical expertise. "Mr. Chen," Frank said, his voice carrying a gravity that made the executive stop checking his watch. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. This isn't just a software glitch. Someone has deliberately modified your car's computer system to allow external control. Your vehicle can be driven remotely by someone else, without your knowledge or consent." Chen stared at him. "That's ridiculous. Cars don't work that way." "Modern cars absolutely work that way," Frank replied. "Your Tesla has over 100 million lines of code, multiple internet connections, and enough computing power to run a small data center. If someone with the right skills wants to take control of your vehicle, they can do it." Frank turned the diagnostic screen toward Chen, showing him the evidence. "Look at this. Your car is receiving commands from an external server. The commands are telling it to navigate to a specific location at a specific time, regardless of what you input into the navigation system." Chen leaned forward, studying the screen. "What location?" Frank's expression darkened. "The Charleston County Courthouse. Today at 2:30 p.m. The implications hit Chen immediately. "But that's when I'm supposed to be there for my meeting. I'm testifying in a federal corruption case involving city contractors." Frank felt the familiar weight of responsibility that he'd hoped never to experience again. This wasn't just a cybersecurity issue anymore. This was a targeted assassination attempt, using a weaponized vehicle. And Frank was the only person who had detected it in time to stop it. "Mr. Chen, I need you to call the FBI immediately. Give them my name and tell them that a former DOD cybersecurity engineer has identified a credible threat against a federal witness. They'll know what that means." While Chen made the call, Frank continued his analysis of the Tesla's compromised systems. What he found was even more disturbing than he'd initially realized. The malware wasn't just designed to control Chen's car. It was part of a larger network that had infected dozens of vehicles throughout the city. All of them were scheduled to converge on the courthouse at the same time. Frank's 20 years of experience with military cybersecurity had taught him to think like an attacker, and the pattern he was seeing was terrifyingly familiar. This wasn't just an assassination attempt. This was a coordinated terrorist attack using autonomous vehicles as guided missiles. The FBI arrived within 30 minutes, led by Agent Sarah Martinez, a cybersecurity specialist who recognized Frank's name from classified briefings about military vehicle security. She took one look at Frank's diagnostic setup and immediately understood the scope of what they were dealing with. "Mr. Morrison," she said, "how many vehicles are we talking about?" Frank gestured to the array of monitors he'd connected to track the malware network. "At least 47 vehicles that I can identify, all Tesla Model S and Model X vehicles, all with modified autonomous driving systems, all programmed to arrive at the courthouse between 2:25 and 2:35 p.m. today." Agent Martinez studied the data. "Can you prevent them from executing their programmed routes?" "I can try," Frank replied. "But I'll need access to Tesla's central communication system to send override commands to all affected vehicles simultaneously. And I'll need to do it without alerting whoever's controlling them that their attack has been discovered." Frank's plan was audacious and technically complex. Using his knowledge of military vehicle communication protocols, he would create a spoofed Tesla service command that would appear to be routine maintenance instructions, but would actually disable the malware and return control to the legitimate drivers. The challenge was doing it quickly enough to prevent the attack while making it look like a normal system update. Working with Agent Martinez and a team of FBI cybersecurity specialists, Frank began the process of crafting and implementing his counterstrike. It was the kind of high-stakes technical work that he'd done hundreds of times for military systems. but never under such immediate time pressure, and never with civilian lives hanging in the balance. The clock showed 1:45 p.m. when Frank initiated his override sequence. Across Charleston, 47 Tesla vehicles simultaneously, what appeared to be a routine software update. The update disabled the malware, restored normal vehicle operations, and logged the location of every compromised car for law enforcement follow-up. But Frank's work wasn't finished. The sophisticated nature of the attack suggested that whoever had orchestrated it had backup plans, and Frank's experience with military cybersecurity had taught him that the first attack was often just a distraction for the real threat. "Agent Martinez," Frank said as he monitored the network traffic from the disabled vehicles, "we need to expand our search. This attack was too well coordinated to be a one-off operation. There are probably other vehicle types and other targets." Frank's instincts proved correct. Within minutes of disabling the Tesla network, his monitoring equipment detected similar malware signatures in Ford F-150 Lightning electric trucks, Chevrolet Bolt electric vehicles, and even some hybrid vehicles that had been modified with a beam. Aftermarket autonomous driving systems. The real target wasn't just the courthouse. It was the entire downtown Charleston area. The Tesla attack had been designed to draw law enforcement attention to the courthouse, while a second wave of compromised vehicles targeted the federal building, the Port Authority, and the main hospital. It was a multi-target terrorist attack that would have killed hundreds of people and crippled the city's infrastructure. Frank spent the next 4 hours working with the FBI to identify and disable every compromised vehicle in the Charleston area. His unique combination of military cybersecurity expertise and civilian automotive knowledge made him the only person capable of understanding both the technical complexity of the attack and the civilian context in which it was being executed. By 6 p.m., Frank had identified and neutralized 127 compromised vehicles representing 12 different makes and models. The FBI had arrested 16 suspects, including the software engineer who had developed the malware and the terrorist cell that had been planning to use the vehicles as weapons. "Mr. Morrison," Agent Martinez said as they concluded their work, "you've prevented what would have been the most sophisticated terrorist attack in U.S. history. How did you know to look for this kind of threat?" Frank removed his glasses and cleaned them with a rag that had been stained with both motor oil and the stress of the day. "Because I spent 20 years designing systems to prevent exactly this kind of attack. Military vehicles are hardened against cyber intrusion because we always assumed that enemies would try to turn our own weapons against us. But civilian vehicles don't have those protections. And most people don't realize that their car is just as much a computer as their laptop." Frank looked around his shop at the diagnostic equipment that had revealed the hidden threat, at the Tesla that had been scheduled to deliver a bomb to the courthouse, at the ordinary-looking workplace where he'd just prevented a mass casualty event. "The thing is," Frank continued, "this won't be the last time. As more vehicles become autonomous, as more systems become connected to the internet, the attack surface keeps growing. Every smart car, every connected system, every piece of technology that's designed to make our lives easier can also be weaponized by someone with the right skills and the wrong intentions." Agent Martinez nodded. "We're going to need your help, Mr. Morrison. The FBI is establishing a new task force focused on vehicular cyber terrorism. Your expertise could save a lot of lives." Frank was quiet for a moment, considering the offer. He'd left the defense world because he'd wanted to get away from the constant pressure of protecting people from threats they couldn't see, but the events of the day had reminded him that those threats didn't disappear just because he'd stopped looking for them. "I'll consult," Frank said finally. "But I'm not going back to full-time government work. I've got a shop to run, and apparently it's become more important than I realized." Over the following weeks, Frank's story became a carefully managed piece of public information. The FBI released enough details to credit him with preventing a major terrorist attack, but the specific technical details of the threat and Frank's background remained classified. Frank was invited to speak at cybersecurity conferences, consult with automotive manufacturers, and advise law enforcement agencies on vehicular cybersecurity. But Frank's most important work continued to happen in Bay 3 of Advanced Auto Solutions, because he'd learned something that day that would guide the rest of his career. The most dangerous threats often came disguised as the most familiar conveniences. Frank upgraded his diagnostic equipment, expanded his cybersecurity scanning protocols, and began training other mechanics to recognize the signs of vehicular cyberattacks. He also began working with Tesla, Ford, and other manufacturers to improve the security of their vehicles' computer systems. Most importantly, Frank changed his approach to customer service. When customers complained about his thorough diagnostic procedures, he took the time to explain why those procedures were necessary. When they seemed impatient with his security checks, he helped them understand that their vehicles were sophisticated computer systems that required the same kind of protection as their laptops and smartphones. Michael Chen became one of Frank's most loyal customers and strongest advocates. He'd been 15 minutes away from unknowingly driving a bomb into a federal building, and Frank's inefficient security protocols had saved not just his life, but the lives of hundreds of people who would have been in the courthouse that day. "You know what I tell people about Frank Morrison?" Chen said during a local news interview about the prevented attack. "I tell them that he's not just a mechanic. He's a guardian. He's standing between us and threats that we don't even know exist." Frank continued working on electric vehicles, but now his customers understood that they weren't just getting automotive repair. They were getting protection from invisible threats that could turn their cars into weapons, their commutes into assassination attempts, and their technology into vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit. Because Frank Morrison had learned something during his 20 years with the Defense Department that proved just as valuable in civilian life. The price of security was eternal vigilance, and the most effective guardians were often the ones who worked quietly in the background, checking for threats that others couldn't see and preventing attacks that others couldn't imagine. Some mechanics fixed cars. Frank Morrison protected people from the cars that had been turned into weapons, one diagnostic test at a time. The garage was quiet now, but Frank knew it was a temporary quiet. Tomorrow would bring new vehicles, new systems, and new potential threats. But Frank would be ready because he understood that in a world where every device was connected and every system was vulnerable, someone had to stand guard. And sometimes the most important battleground in the war against terrorism wasn't a foreign battlefield or a government facility. Sometimes it was a neighborhood auto shop where an elderly mechanic in grease-stained coveralls ran diagnostic tests that could save hundreds of lives. Frank Morrison had traded his security clearance for a mechanic's wrench, but he'd never stopped protecting people. He just found a new way to do it, one electric vehicle at a time. So now I ask you, how many Frank Morrisons work quietly among us? How many former defense contractors, cybersecurity experts, and military engineers have found new ways to protect us from threats we never see coming? Share your thoughts in the comments, because heroes don't always wear uniforms or carry badges. Sometimes they wear coveralls and carry diagnostic equipment, standing guard in the most ordinary places against the most extraordinary dangers. Thank you for watching Retired Soldier Stories. If this tale of hidden expertise and technological vigilance moved you, subscribe and help us honor those who never stop protecting us, even when their battlefield has become our neighborhood. Until next time, remember that the person fixing your car might be the only thing standing between you and someone who wants to turn that car into a weapon. And in our connected world, that protection might be more valuable than you'll ever know.